Welcome to another narrated London walk, one which many of you have asked me to do, so here it is today. It is a Jack the Ripper tour, and we are at Aldgate Pump, on the border between the City of London and the East End. We're standing at the junction where Aldgate meets Fenchurch Street and Leadenhall Street, and Aldgate Pump stood and still stands as a symbolic gateway into the city, into the East End. Coming from the wealthy City of London. We're looking into the city right now. This is Fenchurch Street, and Victorians often wrote that once you passed the pump, the city's tone changed. The respectable City of London became the chaotic East. And we're looking towards Leadenhall Street now. And tonight I'd like you to imagine that you're walking beside me down narrow cobblestone alleys past gas lamps into one of the most misunderstood corners of London, actually. And I'm advertising my self-guided Jack the Ripper walk here, which you can find on London Beyond Time and Place. I'll put a link down into this description below. And I'd like to point out that this walk does not follow the murders of Jack the Ripper in chronological order. Hello. It does not, for the Ripper obviously did not care about geographical matters and the tourists that would follow his footsteps. So we are beginning in Mitre Street now. We're still in the City of London. And imagine it's the 30th of September 1888 and you are police constable Edward Watkins of the City of London Police, and you are on your beat. And you patrol the empty streets around here, well, more or less empty streets in Aldgate, around Aldgate. And now, just as he did, we are entering Mitre Square from Mitre Street. And what do we find here? Well, at this spot, in the corner over here, he finds the mutilated body of Catherine Eddowes. Her throat is cut down to the vertebrae. Her intestines are placed over her right shoulder. Her left kidney and her uterus were removed and are missing. Her face is mutilated too. Her eyelids are cut. The top of the nose cut off. There are two triangular flaps cut into her cheeks, and her right earlobe is cut. She is indeed, in fact, the second victim that night. The 30th of September 1888 went down in history as the night of the double event. London is at the height of the Ripper Scare. Two women had been killed since the 31st of August 1888. And on that night, there is Catherine Eddowes, by the way. She's pictured here and has a lovely little text here on a plaque on the wall. And, she was the second victim that night, the first victim being Elizabeth Stride, who had been killed at 1 a.m. In Dudfields Yard in Whitechapel, just about 50 minutes further east from here. She had been killed with her throat cut, but she had not been mutilated. So many historians believe that the Ripper was disturbed, in fact, in Dudfields Yard when he killed Elizabeth Stride, and he went on to find another victim, which was Catherine Eddowes. And she was seen here around 1:35 a.m. by three men, with a man they later described as age 30, 5'7" tall, medium build, and they were standing here at the corner of the passage down to Mitre Square. So we're coming to Aldgate Square now. This is St. Botolph's Aldgate, the church, and I kind of pushed you right into the middle of the Ripper story here. As I said, coming from the city, we should mention that the area obviously looked different when the Ripper roamed the streets. The Church of St. Botolph's was built in 1740 and has been a local landmark ever since, so it witnessed a lot of the events around here. Anyway, so we've jumped right into the middle of the Ripper story, but obviously it is, not. If you walk from east to west, you won't have the chance to deal with the murders and with the story in a chronological way. So we'll just take a walk from the east to the west, and I'll tell you some of the stories related to the Ripper and his victims and the surrounding area while walking the streets. So, while we are following the murderer's footsteps, well, not basically, but we'll follow them later on. I'll tell you when we reach that point. So while we are on our way, I should take the opportunity to paint a picture of the area and the era. So it's the year 1888. We are still in the city, about to enter the East End of London. And this area beyond the Tower of London was described as darkest London by the socialist and writer Margaret Harkness. And the American writer Jacob Levy described the East End as the abyss in 1903. For centuries, the world supplied the city of London with all it required, and it all passed through the Whitechapel docks, or through the docks, and then through Whitechapel and Stepney and the other areas that form part of Tower Hamlets and form part of the East End of London. And also refugees shaped the area, from the Huguenots of France to the people of Ireland who fled the potato famine and the famines, to the persecuted Jews of Europe. They all made their way to the lanes and alleys of Whitechapel and Spitalfields. And we are now crossing the border from the City of London to the East End. We are on Middlesex Street, and where we'll talk about immigration back in the day in a moment. But for now, let me please point out that the tale of Jack the Ripper is, well, it is in fact a tale of two cities. For in 1888, well, not only then, but London had and still has today two police forces. The City of London Police, which we already mentioned, they are responsible for the Square Mile, and Edward Watkins, who found the body of Catherine Eddowes, he was part of this police force, of the City of London Police Force. And then, of course, there is the Metropolitan Police Force, based in Scotland Yard. They are responsible for the rest of London. And in 1888, the commissioners of both police forces were ex-soldiers, and they both jealously guarded their territory. And Mitre Square, where we started, is in the city, and therefore City of London police territory. And the other Ripper murders, they took place in Whitechapel and Spitalfields in the East End of London and in Scotland Yard territory. So we've just, at 36 Middlesex Street lived Ripper suspect Jacob Levy. A very interesting story. I'll not go into detail for now, because it would take too much time and would distract too much from the walk. But maybe I'll do something about him in the future. If you have any questions regarding Jacob Levy or any other suspect, just put them down in the comments below. And as I just said, we are now following the Ripper's footsteps. We basically do, because we do know that he came this way from Mitre Square after killing and mutilating Catherine Eddowes. He came this way right here to Goulston Street. And what happened in Goulston Street? So it's still the night of the 30th of September 1888, the night of the double event. Two murders. And at around 2:55 a.m., Police Constable Alfred Long of the Metropolitan Police, this is the other police force, he's on his beat here in Goulston Street, an area almost exclusively inhabited by Jews, and in front of this building on the right, we'll get to the entrance now, Wentworth model dwellings 108 to 119. He finds a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron stained with blood and feces, and as it says here, a message above it. The piece of apron appears to have been wiped with the blade of a knife. Long initially suspected that someone in the house had been attacked and was injured or even killed, and he's shown his lamp in the direction of the staircase and noticed a message written in chalk on the wall, directly above the apron. And some say that the message was, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." And soon officers of both police forces arrive at the scene, quarreling and arguing about which police force is in charge. And due to the fact that Catherine Eddowes was murdered in the city police saw a chalk message as an important piece of evidence in their murder investigation. And they insist on taking photographs of it. But this meant that they'd have to wait for daylight, and the Metropolitan Police feared that the message would lead to further attacks. There had been some in the past because of the murders, further attacks on the Jewish population, especially because the famous Petticoat Lane Market would start a few hours later in these streets. And they wanted the message to be wiped off. And this discussion only ended when the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Charles Warren, arrived in Goulston Street between 5 and 5:30 a.m. and the street was under his jurisdiction, so he ordered the message to be wiped away immediately before a photograph could be taken. And so, hence we do not know the exact wording of the message, and also we don't know if the message really came from the murderer or if it had just been a graffito that was on the wall anyway, and that the murderer just dropped the piece of apron, for that he did. In fact, he was there. If he just dropped it below, either intentionally or unintentionally. So, talking about immigration, it was estimated that by the late 1880s, there were at least 60,000 Jews in East London, half of them foreign-born. Many of these newcomers were fleeing from persecution in Eastern Europe. And why did they come to this part of London? Well, because it was cheap, it was close to the docks, and it had established support networks. Work was often in sweated labor. That meant long hours, low pay, cramped workshops. Families lived in tiny rooms. Privacy was a luxury. Survival indeed came first. And at the time, sensationalist politicians and newspapers accused immigrants of flooding the area, lowering wages and bringing crime. A familiar story, one repeated in many eras. So the story goes that an impoverished community arrives, works hard to survive, and becomes a target of fear. So I just see that at this point of the walk, when I uploaded the original video, I mentioned the two police forces at this point. I don't have to do that now, but the text is here for you once again. We are heading towards another murder site, the final murder site, in fact. But we're also coming to a street which, it has a story that is a prime example of life in the East End. As I mentioned, in 1903, so some 15 years after the Ripper had been in this area, a young American journalist named Jack London, already known for his tales of survival and hardship, found himself wandering through the dark heart of Victorian London's East End. He was only 26 at the time, had grown up poor, and was drawn to explore the slums. And his journey inspired his book, The People of the Abyss, his journey through the East End, and he describes one account of terrible living conditions here in Frying Pan Alley in Spitalfields. One of the worst places Jack visited was a sweating den, not far from where we are walking now. He described walking on a slimy pavement, entering a cramped and foul-smelling house, and climbing stairs piled with refuse. This corner here is important in the Ripper story because you can see the house from 1895. It includes Annie Paumier, I don't know. And she was selling chestnuts on the morning after the murder of Mary Kelly and was approached by a strange gentleman who asked her if she had known about the murder, and she said she had, and he said, "I know more about it than you." And then he headed up Sandy's Row, turned around to see if she was watching him, and the frightened woman noticed that he was carrying a black, shiny bag. It does fit to we are walking through Artillery Passage, by the way. It does fit to the description of another strange character around, in the same days around the murder of Mary Kelly that was described by some other witnesses and some other women. But again, it would be too much to mention it now, here and now. But maybe I can tell you a little bit about Artillery Lane and Artillery Passage, because, well, this is a bit before the Ripper murders now. As the middle class started to grow in the 18th century, obviously the desire for shopping also did. So Georgian shops they opened up, and they were characterized by bay windows made up of small panes of glass for displaying goods. And one of these examples can still be found. One of the examples of a Georgian shopfront can be found at 56 Artillery Lane. Mr. Tenpenny's lodging house, I'll mention that again in a minute. It's too much to point it all out. Alice Mackenzie was murdered on the 17th of July, 1889. She's not part of the canonical victims, but she lived in Mr. Tenpenny's lodging house in Gunthorpe Street over there. And this is just an atmospheric house facade front that has been left standing there while the rest of the house had been demolished. It does have a ghostly character to it, doesn't it? Anyway, one more thing about Artillery Lane. So the name of Artillery Lane and Artillery Passage, they both come from the fact that the area was, during the reign of King Henry VIII, turned into a military training ground. So this area here, particularly for artillery, crossbows and longbows. And if I'm not entirely mistaken, here on the right, that's the example of the Georgian shopfront. I didn't film it when I walked past it, because I was focusing on the Ripper-related stuff. But anyway, I'll just point it out to you for you to think about it. So we're coming to the murder scene of Mary Kelly, a very attractive woman. She was 25 years old, about 5'7" tall, and is said to have had fair hair. And we don't know too much about her. What we do know comes directly from her. This is Providence Row Night Shelter, and her story is connected to it a bit. It is believed that she stayed with the nuns here at the Providence Row Night Providence Row Night Shelter. It was built in 1868, run by the Sisters of Mercy, and provided lodging to the destitute of all parts without distinction of creed, color, and country. And you could just see the women's entrance, and the men's entrance was just around the corner. And we are heading up Crispin Street now. The Horn of Plenty was on the other side of the street, long gone. It was there that Mary Kelly was one of the pubs where she was seen, allegedly seen on the night of her murder, or before her murder. And, well, roughly at this spot, crossing through the building to Commercial Street, is where Dorset Street once was. Called the worst street in London back in the day. It's no longer there. And the houses were terribly 3- and 4-story houses. Many of them were common lodging houses. And yeah, today it's inside a modern building. It's not there anymore, but it runs through, its former course runs through this building. You can still enter. There's the colourful frontage of Donovan Bros, a landmark sign of the area. you can still go into the yard and, well, more or less roughly get an idea of where Miller's Court used to be, where Mary Kelly was, in fact, killed on the 9th of November, 1888. But yeah, it's not very atmospheric anymore. But you can still go inside and have a look. You can do this on my self-guided tour. Well, how about that? The link is in the description. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as good as possible. As I said, when I filmed this walk, I didn't really think about doing a narrated version, so please excuse me if I'm a bit hectic at some points, or if I'm rambling a bit, because I'm still stuck in one story, while the walking is faster than I used to be. So in there is the former location of Miller's Court. Over there to the left, that's where Mary Kelly's room used to be and where she was killed. And here we have Spitalfields Market, opened in 1887. Well, these buildings to celebrate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. And we are heading towards Nicholas Hawksmoor's magnificent Christ Church. Nicholas Hawksmoor was an architect. Originally, he was an apprentice to Sir Christopher Wren. He built, several churches in London, but that's another story. I'll get into these churches and the meaning behind them and the symbolism behind them. Certainly in another walk, self-guided walk, maybe in another video. So this is Christ Church, built between 1714 and 1729. The 5 Ripper victims, well, not only the canonical 5, but all of the women in the area, and all the victims of the Whitechapel murderer, and presumably the killer himself. They were accustomed to its view. And Annie Chapman, the second victim, she was said to have been sitting on the steps of Christ Church 4 days before she was murdered because of her bad health. And on the night of her death, she was allegedly last seen in the 10 Bells pub, which we'll pass in a minute. Also, Mary Kelly, who we just mentioned, 5th canonical victim, was said to have drunk there on the night of her death, and was said to have a pitch right outside the 10 Bells pub. So I keep mentioning the canonical 5. I should point that out, or explain that. So the Whitechapel murders file, there are 11 cases, victims in it. So that's the 10 Bells, still there. Anyway, 11 victims in the file, but now from nowadays point of view, only 5 of them can be attributed to the same killer. 2 Jack the Ripper, at least that's what most of the experts agree on. And so they are called the canonical 5. They are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. And the murder spree of those 5 being killed ran from the 31st of August 1888 to the 9th of November 1888. So on our left, here in Fournier Street, was Jones, a pawnbroker named Jones. Yes, I think you can still make it out. Well, not at night, but the sign is still there. And here, Catherine Eddowes, the 4th canonical Ripper victim, pawned her partner's boots on the day before she was murdered. And she still had the ticket on her when she was found killed in Mitre Square, which, where we basically started the walk. I think we're turning left into Wilkes Street now. So we are now in Spitalfields. This is part of the east end of London. And this is Wilkes Street. So you can, especially at daytime, these are some of the most beautiful streets in Spitalfields, because they still contain many of the 18th century houses. They were built by and for the Huguenot silk weavers, refugees who brought skills, money, and craftsmanship to London. Are we looking into Paumier Court? I'm not sure. Yeah, that's Paumier Court over there. Little narrow and atmospheric alleyway. But well, yeah, by the mid 19th century, the fortunes of the Huguenot silk weavers had vanished, and these same houses around here, they were turned into common lodging houses, and they were overcrowded and unsanitary, and became home to the poorest residents of the East End. This is Princelet Street. Over there is number 4 Princelet Street, a very atmospheric building. It looks very worn and genuinely is, because unlike many surrounding buildings, it still retains much of its original interior. And it's so unchanged, in fact, that it had been used as a filming location for several Dickens adaptations. It's not open to the public, so please do not attempt to enter, but sometimes it does open for, when there's an exhibition, for example. So I had the opportunity to go in there to see some of Christo's works and admire the interior of the house, and walking through time actually, because it had not changed at all. Very atmospheric. So we are in Hanbury Street now, and for those of you that know the Ripper story, they don't know the connection. They know what Hanbury Street is about, because on the morning of the 8th of September of 1888, at 5:30 a.m., a Mrs. Elizabeth Long is on her way to Spitalfields Market, passing through this very street, and she sees a man and a woman in front of number 29, which has long gone, but you can still see where it used to be, because there's still a number 29. And she doesn't see the man's face, only sees his back, but she later describes him as being of foreign appearance, with a dark complexion, and she overhears them talking. The man asks, "Will you?" and the woman replies, "Yes." And a little later, at 6 o'clock, John Davis, a resident of 29 Hanbury Street, he enters the backyard of his house, and he finds a dead woman who turns out to be a woman named Annie Chapman. He finds her dead in the yard. He sees her mutilated body lying between the stairs and the wooden fence. Her throat is slit several times, the abdomen entirely laid open, her intestines are pulled out and placed over her right shoulder, and her uterus is missing. So a truly terrible sight. And he runs out into the street and screams for help. And well, that was the murder of Annie Chapman, the second canonical Ripper victim. So now we're on Brick Lane, famous Brick Lane, especially for its Indian curries and for its very lively atmosphere. So yeah, as I said, Hanbury Street, the murder of Annie Chapman. Mrs. Long saw Annie. She later, when she was shown Annie's body in the mortuary, she recognized her as being the woman that she saw in front of number 29. And, well, she did get a good glimpse of the killer, didn't she? Because, yeah, it's very unlikely that Annie was going into the yard with another man within a couple of minutes. So it is very likely that Mrs. Long saw the Ripper, or the man who became known as Jack the Ripper. So we are walking up Brick Lane. Maybe I can say something about prostitution at this point. Well, it's a bit of a difficult topic. I'm very aware of that, but it has to be mentioned. So, working conditions in the East End, they were hard. And for many girls and women, prostitution was the only source of income. So, when it was almost impossible for men to find work, the survival of many families in the East End dependent on a mother or a daughter being a street prostitute. And prostitutes without a home were often called the unfortunates. Many of them were in their 40s, in poor health, and had usually experienced social descent. So, by the way, this is over there. I'm just waiting for it so you can see it. The old drinking fountain. I was waiting for that. Old drinking fountain dating from 1860. Most of these women, they had similar lives characterized by violent partners, poverty, alcoholism, and a so-called fourpenny knee trembler earned them the money for a bed in one of the common lodging houses, in the doss houses of the area. Some sources claim that there were 80,000 prostitutes in London in 1888. Those who lived on the streets, they spent the money they earned primarily on alcohol rather than on food or accommodation, and these circumstances unfortunately made it easy for the Whitechapel murderer to find his victims in the autumn of 1888. So, yeah. Well, maybe I can say something about the doss houses. They were common lodging houses or doss houses, shared accommodations for the poor who could no longer afford their own home. The beds were usually dirty and infested with vermin, and double beds cost 8p a night, single beds 3 or 4p. If you couldn't afford it, you could sleep standing up for 2p among hundreds of men, women and children lined up behind a rope, stretched from one side of the room to the other. And if you weren't able to get money for a bed in a doss house, you had to go to the workhouse or ended up living on the streets. Okay, so we are still on Brick Lane, and I thought I would point it out. I'm not quite sure if maybe I'm doing it. Oh no, just forget what I say. I remember where I went, so I'll talk about what I was thinking of in a minute. So we're coming to the junction with Osborn Street, Brick Lane and Osborn Street, and this is where Emma Smith was attacked in April of 1888. In the early hours of the 3rd of April, Emma Smith, she staggered back to her lodging house in George Street in Spitalfields. She was badly injured and bleeding, and she told the deputy housekeeper, Mary Russell, that she had been attacked and robbed by several men. As it says here, this disturbing occurrence was certainly not related to the Ripper, but Smith's name was the first to appear in the Whitechapel murders file. So she was taken to the Royal London Hospital. She told the doctor that she had been assaulted here in Osborn Street at around 1:30 a.m. and the injuries were horrific. A blunt object had been forced into her vagina with such violence that it caused fatal internal damage. So Emma Smith died the following morning, the 4th of April 1888, from peritonitis. Sorry, English is not my native tongue. She was 45 years old. She had lived in Whitechapel for around 18 months, survived by prostitution, and so there are several different views on her story. Opinions differed over whether she could be considered a Ripper victim. Walter Dew, who the detective who later became famous for the capture of Dr. Crispin, was a young constable in the H division. Oh, by the way, this is where the Whitechapel used to stand, St. Mary's, over there, which it is long gone now. It was destroyed in the war, but it used to stand there, and that's where the area got its name from. Anyway, Walter Dew, he was a young constable in the H division, the Metropolitan Police Division responsible for Whitechapel. Jack the Chipper, yeah, I know. Got a bit of backlash, the one in Greenwich when it opened for the name. And yeah, Walter Dew, he later believed that Emma Smith's death marked the beginning of the series. Others, including Chief Constable Melville McNaughton and Sir John William Not Bower, later Commissioner for the City of London Police, they argued that she had been killed by local gang members. And Walter Dew apparently claimed, or he later recalled, that the crime was seen as more than a usually unpleasant incident in a district where acts of violence were of daily occurrence. Angel Alley, which this leads us to our next story, or the next murder, the one of Martha Tabram. Are we entering Angel Alley? I'm not sure if we do. Yes, we do. So, Martha Tabram, on the night of the 6th of August, she was in Whitechapel, drinking in Whitechapel pubs with a friend known as Pearly Paul, or her real name was Marianne Connolly. And the two met two soldiers and shortly before midnight went their separate ways. And Pearly Paul, she took the corporal up here, while Martha Tabram, she took the other soldier down the next alleyway that we'll enter. So Martha, once again, her story is one of gradual social descent rather than a sudden collapse. She was a working class woman whose life was shaped by unstable relationships, alcohol, and the absence of any effective safety net. So very, very sad story. So this is the White Hart Pub, one of the pubs. Well, this may have been one of the pubs they had visited. It was certainly here back in the day, and as I say here, in 1890, Ripper suspect George Chapman worked in the cellar. Again, just like with Jacob Levy, another story, not for today, but maybe for another video. And this is Gunthorpe Street, a very atmospheric starting point for many Ripper tours. They start here on Whitechapel High Street, and then they walk through this little passage here, and they start their journey into the East End and into the area of Jack the Ripper. And it was also where Martha Tabram went with her soldiers. So Martha was 39 years old at the time of her death. She stood around 5 feet 3 inches, had dark hair, and came from a working class family. And if you keep on walking along this street, which we'll do in a minute, you will come to where George Yard Buildings used to be. It's not there anymore, but that's where Martha's body was discovered by resident John Saunders Reeves in the early morning hours of 7th of August of 1888. And she was lying in a pool of blood. So she had been stabbed 39 times, which is very, 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 well, you can't really imagine it, can you? So police attention focused on the soldiers, obviously, and Marianne Connolly, Pearly Paul, she later identified 2 men from the Coldstream Guards. Both, however, had alibis, and the investigation stalled. And the coroner, George Collier, he, at the inquest, he described the killing of Martha Tabram as one of the most dreadful murders anyone could imagine, and urged improvements to lighting in the area. So as it says here, she was stabbed 39 times, Martha Tabram. It does not fit the pattern of the Ripper, who killed his victims by strangulation and then a throat cut, and began the mutilations only when the women were dead. So what he actually wanted to do, the mutilations, they came after the killing. And it's a very different so-called modus operandi, a very different killing pattern with Martha Tabram, although some say that, most serial killers, they develop a modus operandi over time. So perhaps the killer was still learning when he killed Martha Tabram, and maybe also even Emma Smith in April of that year. So Wentworth Street, and we're heading back towards Brick Lane, and we'll cross the site of the attack on Emma Smith. So we'll come to that corner once again, and then we are also going to pass one of the spots, another spot connected to or a spot connected to the first canonical victim, Mary Ann Nichols, or Polly Nichols. We haven't mentioned her, I think, yet here, but we'll do that in a minute. So Mary Ann Nichols, she was murdered on the 31st of August 1888. She was found at 3:40 a.m. in the morning by a carman named Charles Cross or Charles Ledgmere in Bucks Row in Whitechapel, a little further east. And he thought it was a dark bundle lying in the gateway. And the woman that was found there, that was Mary Ann Polly Nichols, a small brown-haired woman who had turned 43 3 days earlier. She had also lived a respectable life, and on the night of her death, she had been drinking here in what used to be the Frying Pan Pub. It's not there anymore, but you can still see the sign of the two crossed pans at the roof. Anyway, she had also lived a respectable life. She was married, had 5 children. Then her husband left her. Her husband, Frederick Nichols, he left her. She suffered from depression. She drank, and she left her husband and family when he had begun an affair with a nurse who had helped with the 5th child. And then after she had left the family for the next 7 years, she lived in workhouses all over London, or at times with her father. And she was staying in the East End in doss houses of bad reputation in the weeks before her death. And on the night of her death, she was drunk, and when she went to her lodging house, she didn't have the 4 pence for her bed, and she was sent back out on the street by the doss house manager, and her last words were, "I'll soon get my doss money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." And now we are in Fashion Street, and in Fashion Street, or connected to Fashion Street, we meet the 3rd canonical victim, Elizabeth Stride. I apologize in advance because I was able to include some details on some of the women. Well, I could introduce them more properly than some of the other women, which is not because of disrespect. It's got something to do with trying to narrate this video that I was filming while walking, and as I said, I didn't think about narrating it one day. But you can all find it in my self-guided Ripper walk, which you can find on my website, London Beyond Time and Place. Anyway, so Elizabeth Stride, let's talk about her for a moment. She was the first woman to be killed on the 30th of September, so the first woman killed on the night of the double event, the other one being Catherine Eddowes. And Elizabeth Stride was living in a doss house on Flower and Dean Street. Doesn't exist anymore. She was born in Sweden, Gothenburg in Sweden, had come to London in 1866. She had been married to John Stride, with whom she had had a coffee shop in Poplar, and as she had started drinking, the couple split up, and Liz, or Long Liz as she was called, she went to the East End, living in several doss houses. And she was 45 at the time. She stood 5'5" tall, and it is believed that her nickname Long Liz came from that, and she had curly brown hair. And Well, she cleaned some rooms in her lodging house, and then she came here on the night of her death, on the evening before, and then she came here to have a drink to the former Queen's Head pub. So she went here, and then she went out and met her murderer later that night. And also, I'm just mentioning this story here. On the 9th of November at 2 a.m., a man named George Hutchinson saw Mary Kelly, the fifth Ripper victim, on this stretch of the road right before, right before she was killed, and right here before the Queen's Head pub. And he saw her and another man he described as age 34 or 35, 5'6" tall, with dark eyes and hair, and carrying a parcel. He saw them meeting. Well, she kind of picked the man up in front of the pub and took him with her to Miller's Court. George Hutchinson followed them, and he saw them going into Miller's Court and into Mary's room. And he left later, so he didn't see them or the man coming out. And at 4 a.m., two neighbors in Miller's Court heard a faint cry, "Oh, murder!" but did not react, for such crimes were common in the area. And this is where we finish our walk. Christchurch, Spitalfields, Nicholas Hawksmoor's masterpiece. So, as I said, I try to cram or put as many information as possible into this narrated video. It's not always that easy when trying to narrate a walking video recorded a while ago. So this is the 10 bells where some of the Ripper's victims were said to have drunk. You can find parts of this walk and more Ripper locations on my self-guided Jack the Ripper walk. You can find it on London Beyond Time and Place. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I'm finishing this walk with a pint in the 10 bells to commemorate the women killed by the Whitechapel murderer, and I wish you a very good night, and thank you for watching.